Okay, obviously taking off into headwind, we will be taking off from runway 11. Quite strengthly winds, 19 knots. So what we'll do is use runway 11, and we will also be arriving to ILS 10, and we'll use a Trinidad transition. That's not database. Oh well. Anyway, for now, a thing you can do is I know that the NDB for this airport is Crown Point, which is TAB, so it's an NDB just here. So what you could do to make your own SID, as it were, instead of takeoff then following the line that would just go around straight away, you can click on tab and it will appear at the bottom here. Then use a bearing, so we want runway 110, which is there, and then a / indicates the difference between a bearing and the miles. So then we can do 3 or 4 miles. For intents purposes here, I'll do 4 miles. And then you put that into there. And that will appear as TAB01. You'll often find them in pre-programmed stars and SIDs. But if we then put that to the top of the list, we have a nice waypoint that's out instead of directly on top of us, which the LNAV will be able to follow. I'm not sure why the standard terminal arrival route is not working for Port of Spain, but we'll try and we could follow possibly a tab RNAV transition. We'll probably do that. That'll be fine. Okay. We then, to check the legs page, we'll follow the 8 nautical miles and go from our custom waypoint here and activate that now. Fill in our 0 fuel weights, our reserves, our cost index we'll use 15. Phone call's not good this time. Anyway, cost index, for you those who don't know, is basically an economy way of managing speed. Basically, the faster you go, the more fuel you're going to burn, in theory. Airlines like Ryanair use a cost index of 6. Norwegian will use 15 to 30 depending on the flight. So it's giving us a cruise altitude of 8,000 feet here, which is in our flight plan. Cruise winds is not really necessary for the short duration of this flight, and the altitude that we're going is not going to affect the fuel burn too much. I'm not concerned about that. Our transition altitude is 18,000 feet we can use. We then go on to N1 limits. Now, a fantastic program to use if you're calculating your D-rate takeoff is called TopCat. And basically what this does is calculates your takeoff distances with reduced thrust. So you won't be able to see this, but basically I'm going into here, selecting a takeoff with the winds, and putting in our gross weight, and it will basically give us a D-rate takeoff. So that is giving us flaps 5 with takeoff 2 at 45 D-rate. That'll give us plenty of runway. It will give us a margin of 830 meters. The margin basically means that you will be 200 feet above the threshold at 830 meters before the end of the runway. With TopCat, it's very safe to go to the lowest amount that it shows. You're not going to run out of runway. You're not going to go off the end or whatever. With 45 and a takeoff 2, that's giving us climb 1 and not climb 2. And that will give us, basically, save the wear and tear of the engines, prolong their life. Now, you don't have to, but you can fill in the runway winds here to get you a more accurate V1, 135 at 19, with a runway slope of 0. That will give us a bit of a differentiation between our V1 and VR speeds. Also give you your trim, and we can fill that in shortly. So, onto the MCP, we'll do 8,000 feet with a runway heading of 109er. Put the IS Mac to V2 speed, and you can put the brakes to RTO. People like to engage LNAV, VNAV and the autothrottle on the ground, but it's not really correct procedure. A lot of airlines will arm the autothrottle when lining up onto the runway. It basically says if you accidentally hit the toga switch and you're on a taxiway or in front of a building, then you're not going to crash into it basically. So autothrottle is armed going onto the runway along with the strobe lights, and you can do LNAV as well. At this point I'm going to start the APU. So we're switching from ground power to APU. So we'll put the forward fuel pump here on and then start the APU. People often forget to put the fuel pump on, but it's necessary. Yaw damper on. Just scanning the overhead, so we go from top left down and then scan the top here. Seatbelts are on. Anti-collision light not needed yet. We'll do the window heats on and then we'll test them for any failure. Overheat test. Got 4 warnings here, which is great. Recycle them. Propede not necessary at this moment. That will be done after engine start. We're cruising at 8,000 feet for the air conditioning panel, and then we can also put the packs on now. They'll kick in as soon as the AP generators are selected on. So pretty much getting ready for the setup now. We'll check the fuel. So you can see here that we're landing with 3.8 tons of fuel. I'm sorry for any American viewers that will be used to working in pounds, but I'm British, and like the rest of the world we use kilograms. So the NG, a benchmark figure to land with, you're aiming for about anywhere between 2 and 3 is great. 2.5 is a good benchmark. So what we'll do is we'll adjust the fuel accordingly to about 3.8. Let's see what that gives us. Gives us about 3.1. 3.1 is I'm happy with. It's well within limits anyway. Obviously that's going to affect our takeoff performance, so what I'll do is I'll check that again, because our gross weight has reduced by 600 kilograms. So it's giving me 46 takeoff 2. I put 45, so we can reduce that further to 46. And that will delete the takeoff speeds. We'll re-put them in now. So we are in the beautiful island of Tobago, and GSX is telling me that we're ready to go. So we'll close up the doors here. Okay, so we're pretty much ready to go. We'll select the beacon light on and ask for pushback and departure with a right turn out. Let's just check this now. Scan the overhead one more time. You then do your before start checklist after the before start procedure. So what we'll do now is we'll turn the packs to off. AP bleed is open. This will give us more power to start the engines, of course. Select all fuel pumps on, and we're ready to go. You can also set up the transponder. If you're flying on VATSIM, you'd obviously have 1 to 2 decimal 8 if you are flying without ATC, but we're not on VATSIM at the moment, so 2000 on the squawk and TA only. Okay, release the auto brakes. Oops. Okay, we'll start the number 2 engine. So, packs are off. Start number 2. Now generally this value here of N2, you'll want to be engaging the fuel level switch at 25 N2. So I'm just going to have a look at the fly plan again. Sorry, right, okay. So we can go to plan mode here. I'm sure most of you are aware of how to do this. You can see here the RNAV arrival is it's very nice. We have altitude limits here because there's a large deal of mountains towards the north of the airfield. But there you go. We'll have a look at some arrival information as we get down into the cruise. I'll try and do something here just to make sure the sound is good. Hopefully that's a little bit better. Okay, so we are looking at setting up the aircraft now for taxi and takeoff. So first things to do is that we put in the packs, turn on the probe heat and the hydraulics. Hydraulics will then allow us to crash the fine and take off. And then we put in the generators and turn on the ECU. Thrust levers go to continuous, taxi lights on, wheel dampers not come on yet, I think that's still this time. There we go. Engage on them now if you want to. What I might do is, just to increase the length of time for the flight, I might go on heading select towards this point here to give us a little bit more room as we go down. It shouldn't affect the LNAV too much. So, we are pretty much ready to go. Okay. Only need a little thrust to get moving. And that's it, we're right. Don't exceed 10 knots for taxi on on corners, otherwise the limit gets up to 20 and 25. I have a YouTube channel of the same name, FS08 Vortex. There's some tutorials there on how to correctly take off using NADP1 procedures. I'm going to do an NADP1 for here as well, which is straight ahead to 3,000 feet, and then you kind of start cleaning up the aircraft then. I think we have a failure here, yeah. It happens. So, onto the runway. Landing lights on, strobe lights on. Okay, now you're lined up, auto throttle is on, and that will give us toga. We then go to about 40, 45 in flight sim. There we go. So after takeoff you want to be holding the white marker just below our current speed, so you can continue to pull up and try and aim for the white marker. And basically we're going to hold this white marker until 3,000 feet AGL, so that's above ground level. Obviously the airport is at sea level, seeing as we're above the sea. But you can see now that the display here turns to N1. So we will then just continue following it up to 3,000 feet, and then we'll start cleaning up the aircraft. It's a noise abatement procedure basically. So as you can see on the MCP, a nice little trick in the NGX is that when you select, if you're following the NDAP procedure, then by just rotating the mouse once to the right, we'll then put it to the bug up speed. So you see that? Up to 159 now. So we're going to start cleaning up the aircraft, so we'll bug up the speed, which is basically putting the bug to the flaps up indicator, and we'll follow around the side here. Another thing I wanted to explain is the reduced thrust on the NG and on all aircraft actually is basically, if you've used takeoff 2 or takeoff 1 or whatever, you'll see that there's a reduced thrust both on the ECAS display here. You'll see climb 1. And also in the perf page on the M1 limit, you can see here that it's on automatic and we're selected on climb 1. Now, in real life, what you do is if you have been given clearance to climb above 15,000 feet, you would delete this climb limit. So if you've been cleared above flight level 150 or 15,000 feet, you will then delete this perf page here. So although we're only flying to 8,000 feet, I'm going to demonstrate that now. So we've selected delete, put next to climb 1, and you can see that that's given us a higher N1 here. nice little trick. The 777 has a feature where when you click a NIT reference after takeoff, it will automatically go to that N1 limit, as opposed to having to cycle through like we did there. So it's a relatively short flight. You can see our top descent in just over 20 miles. The clouds have come in, but we're in the Caribbean. There's no need for the anti-ice because we're 26 degrees. So it'll follow 240 or 250. I'm happy with that. We can start looking at the approach now. Okay, so what you do on a real world flight is you'd have a look at the difference between your fuel quantity and the estimated fuel at your destination. So we can see that we're 300 kilograms over the fuel that we're going to be landing in. So what we do is when we go to the NIT reference page, we reduce that figure by 3. So we then put 58.6, and that will give us a more accurate VREF speed. Otherwise, it's just going to update as you get nearer. So that's a nice little trick, but you'd only want to do that as you get really close to the airport. So what we're going to do, we're following an RNAV arrival. But just for the backup, I'm going to put in the ILS frequency of 109.7. Someone just asked the airport we just taken off from on the Facebook. It's a Caribbean airline called Tobago, and the airport is called Crown Point, and the designator is Tango Tango Charlie Papa. It's a fantastic place to simulate. The scenery is Latin VFR. It's a great place to simulate because we have big airlines that fly into there. Caribbean Airlines in this livery fly to Trinidad, which we're doing now, and they also fly to New York Kennedy, which is a nice little flight to do from the relatively smaller runway. Virgin Atlantic fly a 2 weekly service in the Boeing 747-400 from Gatwick, and so do British Airways. Monarch also fly an A330 out seasonally once a week. So put the ILS information into the column radios, navigation radios rather. Our front course is 104, so we would then duplicate that in both the first officer's and captain's side. See, it's a little bit bumpy up here, a little bit cloudy, got a bit of a tailwind. So just for your information, I can show you the mountains here on to our left. I was hoping for a clear day, but no matter. Mountains then will take us over the coast and back in. It's a very nice approach actually. So we've set up the information here, everything looking okay. I'll set in the missed approach, which is climb ahead to 4,100 feet with a right turn to Trinidad NDB. So it's good to put in the fixed page. Another little tool that I'll show you now is basically if you program the arrival, you can go to the fixed page and select runway 10 into there. That will only work when you've got the arrival programmed. So we've got runway 10 as a circle here, and then you can put a distance of 10 and 5 nautical miles, and that's just a nice reference. I like to do about 160 knots until about 5 DME and then reduce speed. So here you have a visual demonstration of the 5 DME, which also falls on Talus. And also a 10-mile range here. Nice little trick. Again, we need to put in the missed approach, which is Trinidad NDB, which is 382. that can go there. So a missed approach would be a right turn at 4,100 feet and heading back to Trinidad, and then we can vector ourselves in around again if that's be the case. Our decision height is 265, so we can put that in now. And we'll use auto brake 2 to get off the runway where we want. Again, on a longer flight, I would put in this information here, but for here it's not really necessary. The QNH in Trinidad is 1013 with 34 degrees temperature, which is alright for some. A bit of a crosswind and headwind component of 110 degrees at 16 knots. So our VREF will probably be 150, I'd say 151. Okay, I'm just going to let the engines take over and I'll just fly in the approach. I was hoping for a little bit better weather to showcase the islands, but both sceneries that you're about to see are from Latin VFR, so it's Trinidad and Tobago. Okay, so because we're coming up to the glide slope, I'm going to put flaps 10, which won't change the speed take value here. And as we get close to glide slope, it's a good time to put the gear down to compensate for any bubbling effect for the approach. Someone's asked me how the best kind of, if they have any tips for landing the 737. I do. Basically, the 737 has got a large wingspan to compensate, so it's a very slippery aircraft. Just going to put the gear down now, flaps 15, and then do the first thing to do, continuous thrust, arm the spoiler, and compensate any landing clearances that you may or may not have received. So basically, no, it's important to kind of try and keep the nose down until 30 feet. So 50, 40, 30, keep the nose down, and then very slightly lift the nose up, maybe 2 or 3 degrees. The 737 is very easy to float. People tend to pull up very quickly, and then I'm not paying attention here. People then pull up very quickly and then end up floating down the runway. So it's quite important to lift the nose up, and I'll try and demonstrate as best I can here. I've got slightly poor performance because I'm streaming, but it shouldn't be a problem. I'll just do the length, so slightly up at 30 feet, and it should gently roll down. Okay, so yeah, a bit of a crosswind and headwind component on landing. So again, you don't want to be floating. So 30 feet, lift the nose up. Your acceleration will, a very small increment in pitch attitude will greatly vary the descent rate. But it's practice. So that was a tiny bit hard compared to what I'm used to, but again, you have to take into account the crosswind component, and sometimes you got to just put it down. You will then obviously, a lot of people that are relatively new to flight sim love putting full reverse thrust on when you land, which really isn't necessary. The Boeing 737 has a system where if you have, say, auto brake 2 and you have full reverse thrust, what will happen is the brakes will reduce their load, and you will, even with reverse thrust and if you have auto brake 2, the stopping distance in theory will be exactly the same, obviously depending on runway conditions, but reverse thrust is very rarely used in most situations, in clear weather situations especially. It's also not advised between certain hours of the evening. Lots of airports have limitations on reverse thrust, so the norm is just to put them into idle reverse, and you can do that just by tapping F2, or if you have a button on the controller you can then select it that way. Reverse thrust will be save the engines again, and obviously to replace a turbine fan is more expensive than replacing brakes.